What's up, everybody? We are live. We are back. It's your boy Ian, aka the Writing Renegade from the litunderground.com, here today to do another conscious book review on Robert Bly's essay, Looking for Dragon Smoke. So, first of all, I am covering the essay Looking for Dragon Smoke in the book Looking for Dragon Smoke by Robert Bly. And I'm going to be covering the rest of the sections in this book at a later time, then eventually compiling them into a probably 5-hour plus video. I also, in the very near future, on the litunderground.com, am going to have a premium course and a free course on all of Robert Bly's work. And when I mean all of Robert Bly's work, every single poem, every single nonfiction book, every single essay, everything I can find, I'm going to be talking about and breaking down. So let's hop right into it, everybody. So I would call this piece really just, it's short and it's creative inspiration. If you haven't read it yet, I think you need to read it. It's one of the most important pieces of critical theory and poetry ever. Still to this day, it stands. And let's just start right off with the first paragraph. In ancient times, in the time of inspiration, the poet flew from one world to another, riding on dragons, as the Chinese said. Isaiah from the Bible rode on those dragons. So did Li Po, the Chinese wilderness poet, and Pindar. They dragged behind them long tails of dragon smoke. Some of the dragon smoke still boils out of Beowulf. The Beowulf poet holds tight to Danish soil or leaps after Grendel into the sea. And as Robert Bly would say. So let's just break down on a very basic level dragon smoke. So let's imagine an airplane going by, and when an airplane goes by, it leaves that trail of smoke. It's called technically a contrail, even though it has other names. And imagine that with a dragon smoke, though. Imagine a dragon floating over. The smoke remains. And what Robert Bly is saying is that at one point our consciousness was connected to nature, not just connected to nature in the way that you might be connected to nature. For instance, that you might have a very deep connection to nature like I do. In another one of his essays that I will go over soon, I can't name off the top of my head, Robert Bly talks about how the ancient poets didn't just write in nature, they found forms in nature, stuff that we can't understand. They were writing poems in form to the jaguar, to the coyote, to the sky, to the breeze, to the flow of water, stuff that we can't even decode yet, stuff that he would say that's in Beowulf. If you actually read the Old English, there's this sort of lyricism and flow that resembles nature, and we have lost that. And that is what he means by that. The dragon smoke has faded, and Beowulf has a little of it. Chaucer has even less, and now we have almost none. Now almost all poetry seen in magazines has no depth. It's technically great. Its technical abilities and what it's doing and the emotions and the stories and the progress, beautiful. A+. Every MFA, has student can do that. Actually, a lot can because they don't write books, but that's a different story. But the dragon smoke, so let's talk about the metaphorical definition now of dragon smoke. Dragon smoke is the leaping from the conscious to the unconscious and back into the conscious. Like right now, I'll just say red darts shine in the light. The yellow sky wallows in pain. I was making a leap there. And even though it was a little leap, it maybe didn't make sense. I am leaping around. I am not doing narrative poetry. I'm not writing for a purpose. I am making contact with nature, with the subconscious, and then letting whatever happens happen. And that's what he is talking about right here, right now in this essay. And that what is missing in most poets today and for the last 1,000 years, that ability to go into the unconscious and come back out, but then also not just come into the unconscious and pull out some surrealism or some stuff that is based in society. Robert Bly is talking about things that are based in the axiomatic roots of nature, not simulacra, because a lot of poets, like in Dream Songs by Ashbery, I think it is John Ashbery. Let's look real fast. Dream Songs by Berryman, John Berryman, not Ashbery. John Berryman and his work Dream Songs, that has a lot of leaping, but there's not that much axiomatic flow. And Berryman actually, Robert Bly in another essay, side note, kind of takes a jab at Berryman, saying that anyone that goes external instead of internal ends up killing himself. Sylvia Plath, Mr. Berryman, other authors. He says that if you go too external and you don't head to the internal, because we are nature, the axiomatic roots of nature are within us. Look at the philosophy of Schelling and the German idealists and the spiritual ecology movement now. There is some validity to this concept. And Robert Bly is talking about this. And he brings up the Gilgamesh Enkidu polarity and, of course, the Epic of Gilgamesh that... and let's quote him here. In the myth of Gilgamesh, which takes place in a settled society, psychic forces create Enkidu, the hairy man, as a companion for Gilgamesh, who is becoming too successful. The reader has to leap back and forth between the golden man Gilgamesh and the hairy man. And Robert Bly gets into more of this in his book Iron John with, the wild man, and also in his work with the Sibling Society. So you guys have all of that. So this is what Robert Bly, his definition of leaping, quote unquote, the leap. In terms of language, leaping is the ability to associate fast. In a great poem, the considerable distance between the associations, that is, the distance that spark has to leap, gives the lines their bottomless feeling, their space, and their speed of the association increases the excitement of the poetry. Excuse me. So there is distance between the associations, like water bottle and squid. I guess there's an association, but you see there's a lot of distance. But a lot of poets, if you're reading modern poetry, they're staying in with this certain definition. Okay, you're going to see something on your screen real fast. But for my camera, you are going to see a certain distance. The more distance there is, the better the poem gets. And for all my poets out there, you have to realize that your subconscious will guide you through. The associations will make sense. It all makes sense if you stay in that flow and have some good revision and kind of bridge the gap. The metaphors, the key 2 points, the key to associations are what matters. And if you can get those, you can fix the middle part. You can fix what's in the middle. And We were told of a Li Po. We just talked about Li Po. Li Po is one of my favorite poets. Here's a poem by Li Po. If you ask me why I dwell among green mountains, I should laugh silently. My soul is serene. The peach blossom follows the moving water. There is another heaven and earth beyond the world of men. So look at the leap that happens. This is more subtle, but this is Li Po in I think 800 AD, somewhere in that time period, 700 to 1500 AD. If you ask me why I dwell among, and these quotes are all in the description below, why, and everybody, what's up? If you have made it this far, hit the subscribe button. Say what's up. We are here. We are live. We are looking. Hopefully, there's some more dragon smoke. Hopefully, at a little Li Po right here drinking some wine. Subscribe to the Lit Underground. I am going to be covering everything Robert Bly, every author. I'm going to be releasing more content than any other YouTuber on this stuff and working harder, diving down and releasing this to educate the world. So, if you ask me why I dwell among green mountains, I should laugh silently. There's already the leap happening. He's laughing silently. What does that mean? Why is he laughing silently? Why he's dwelling among green mountains? No logic here. There's slight logic. Then here's the leap. My soul is serene. It makes sense in context, but there is a jump here. My soul is serene. We jump from, we're in the internal, we're using I, but now we're going to my in the soul. We've moved from this person in nature now to the soul. And now we're moving back to nature. Now watch the leap. Now we leapt and we went into the consciousness. Now we're back to the peach blossoms followed the moving water. Now guess what? There's going to be another leap. We can expect another leap. There is another heaven and earth beyond the world of men. And This poem isn't, like I said, the poets of the 20th century, the leaping poets, the Gary Snyders, the Rilkes. There's not these huge movements and contrasts, but there is a contrast, and it's actually a very nice and beautiful, like serene. It's serene. You know, the right word was used. So let's talk about what happened though. And I gotta call it out. I gotta call out some of the audience right now. Christian consciousness took over, however, and Li Po got booted out. That type of poetry got booted out. We got served a big load of bullshit by Christianity. I don't care, what you think happened. Viewing Christianity views human consciousness over natural consciousness. That is in the Bible, in Genesis. That is very well known. That is, if you look at the poetry in Robert Bly's book, News of the Universe, he goes over this even more, which we'll be covering at a later time. Also, shout out that I will be doing an writing eco-poetry seminar, webinar, course very soon in June, July. If you're hearing this, go check that out. It may be already completed, but you'll be able to join and learn how to master eco-poetry and learn a ton about the eco-poets, such as Robert Bly, Li Po, eco-poets. So in Christianity, though, you can't make these leaps because as a religious person, and I'm generalizing here, but if you go into the subconscious and leap back, you are going to find problems with the philosophy of Christianity. There's going to be big problems, everybody. If you go back, and maybe not big problems for you, but if you do that and you create art and you live your life making those leaps, everyone else in the circle who isn't doing that is going to be like, what the fuck, man? They're going to be like, what are you doing? And you're going to be the outsider. And eventually, maybe even burned at the stake as a witch or like thrown out of the circle because you were making those leaps. That's what breaks the Christian narrative. That's why weed is still illegal in a lot of parts of the world and in the United States, because it forces you to take that leap sometimes. And psychedelics, even though, you have to use them in moderation and in a safe and consistent manner, those leaps are important, and those leaps are a learned skill. Some people can do them. Some people are the natural talented people, but there's the engineers of the world, the people who are caught in nude in sleep, still cannot do it. So Chaucer, the Chaucerian poet, is a decline from the Beowulf poet. And if you read Chaucer, there's actually some really good. I just took a Chaucer course like last year, and there is actually read it in Old English or Middle English. There's actually a lot of still natural rhythms and natural flow, but right after that, Chaucer, it starts to diminish. No one else can really do that because Shakespeare is a master, but he's not necessarily a master at the forms of nature. He is a master at deep images and leaping and at narrative and at story and at love and the skill of just writing. Shakespeare is a master of that, but not by the time it reaches him. And without Chaucer, there is no Shakespeare. So that's actually another interesting thing. Poets today have lost the ability to leap, and that's why reading the poetry in the New Yorker or at the Atlantic Review or the Northwest Review and every other magazine I read in my university library library for poetry is such a slog because they're not leaping. There's not that leap. There's nothing to expect. I'm reading 8 pages of a fucking story in a poem form, and that's fine, man, but I can't do that forever. I can't do that. I can't hear about your social cause forever, especially if you're not leaping. Look how Robert Bly and the Vietnam poets wrote poetry, man. They were leaping. They weren't just telling a story, and that's what's actually happened in the poetry world, is that because it has been so saturated and washed down with university systems and the bureaucracy of that and the selection process in that in the publishing house, bureaucracy and, of that nature, that the poets who can leap, the poets who are actually entertaining are now gone because you don't have to be a good poet to make money anymore. You can get your MFA, you can publish a book with the university press, and you can get a job, and the cycle continues. You don't have to be good anymore. Being good, back in the day, you to become Robert Bly, you had to be good because there was only so many slots. Now, though, with all the saturations and all the grants and all this, it's the welfare state in poetry. It's a joke. So don't get me started on that. So another thing that happened was that the Enlightenment period, the 1700s, it focused on a Socratic lineage of philosophy. And the Socratic lineage of philosophy removed a lot of emotions. And That's what kind of led, Newton and the move into the Industrial Revolution, where the self was gone, where the emotions and how you really feel don't matter as much anymore. And that has the working jobs and careers and employment and careerism in poetry. I should probably be. There's the Beowulf poet. Here is Chaucer, my boy Chaucer. There's the Socratic lineage, Socrates taking the hemlock. There is a routing away from the psychic energy of our consciousness, of our subconsciousness, from the ether, from darkness and irrationality to conscious objectivity through scientism or whatever you want to call it. And Christianity helps push that. Industry helped push that. Blake said that after 10 years of school, that they would be living the rest of their lives in Newton's sleep. Newton's sleep, yes, Isaac Newton's sleep. And having been and worked in the public education system, that is so fucking true. You guys have no idea how bad it is out there. These kids are coming out with no creativity, no consciousness of their own. They're asking questions, but they are the preordained questions. The counterculture is not the counterculture anymore. The counterculture has been manufactured just as much as the culture has been manufactured now. And they are in a Newton's sleep. The creative kids, the most creative aren't. But if there's the rest of the creatives are like, well, I'm going to go to graphic design school, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to try to do this to make money. They're not just focused on the practice of art anymore. And I don't want to sit and harp about like, oh, this generation, all generations have been like this. This has been a problem forever. All the dummies in the 40s and 50s were the same way. This has been going on forever. This hasn't changed. It's everyone's fault. It's your fault and it's my fault for not doing something and helping more. Those who are afraid to leap are the people who want to live an experience, who want to live an objective reality. The people, you know who they are. They don't want to do anything. You talk about astrology, like, oh, astrology. You talk about tarot. Oh, that blah, 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 blah. And it's like, shut the fuck up, man. Like, you haven't even tapped into nature yet. So if you want to start blasting the four Western arts of divination, then good for you, man. You're so smart. Like, okay. You got a brain. You can look and go through objectivity, but you haven't experienced meditation and yoga yet. So obviously, you're not going to be able to understand numerology and the Kabbalah and mysticism. It's so sad, man. Like, I deal with it all the time. I meet cool people and I love the personality, but then they start pulling that shit. And it's not like I can't handle criticism. When you get into this, you just start moving to a new level. Even just poetry, when people are reading Tracy Smith and you're reading Rilke, you're like, poet laureate who? The New Yorker published recently a poem by Tracy Smith, the poet laureate or very recent poet laureate, and it was a nature poem. I wish I could find it right now. Maybe we and compared to like Li Po and stuff, doesn't even compare. But she's the best. She's got all the accolades. It's actually kind of funny that Tracy Smith was in Robert Bly's documentary. She was just like, he really pushed the agenda. She didn't really have anything else to say other than that he really was diverse, because Robert Bly is now canceled because of all of his men's movement stuff and bringing back the myth and Jungian psychology. You can't come out in support of Robert Bly anymore. I should have maybe said this earlier. If you're still listening to this, leave a comment, give me a like, up or down. And tell me what your experience with Robert Bly is and trying to share his ideas. There's a lot of negativity. The New York Times actually just revamped his article, like looking back at like someone's review of Iron John. Iron John is not a bad book, man. Like, you have to be able to function in the duality of masculine and feminine, and then also be able to function in the reality of the spectrum of genders. Both have their benefits and both are true. But it gets fucking wild when the Christians are like, well, there's only two genders. And then the people are like, no, there has to be a million genders. This is Robert Bly's a misogynist. He's, sexist for, a sexist transphobe for saying there's only two genders. And it's like, all right now. Like, you guys have no idea what's going on. You guys have no idea the restoration of the soul that a lot of people have had through Robert Bly and experiencing masculinity. So I will not go any further into that. There's so many people out there with blocked love energy who are bored, who are envy, who are have no joy. And it's because they don't know how to make these leaps in consciousness. They don't know how to look for that dragon smoke. And in this world, there's almost none, everybody. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to pump out the smoke machine, the fog machine, like in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I'm trying to pump it out, everybody. But I don't know if anyone's around to see, especially my neighborhood right now, everybody, in my social circle. No one's seeing it. And that's why I'm trying to come to you. Maybe you see it. And then I want you to start pumping out that smoke too. And one of the best ways to do that is, once again, tapping into forms of nature rather than creating your own. Instead of just writing free form, try to sit in nature, try to feel, try to understand. Even if it's not, you don't need, the form doesn't look like anything. It starts with the feeling. It starts with the sound. It starts with the movement. That's how you get to this level. So, a couple other poets who kind of really tapped into this, who really kicked off this movement, are Novalis, and I don't know if I'm saying that right, Goethe, and Holderlein. This is all in German, so don't mind me. They really kicked this off, and especially, actually all of them. And in News to the Universe, I actually don't have any other poems right here. In News of the Universe, he provides a lot of their poems, and you can see, I would check up on those three, Novalis, Goethe, and Holderlein. I will post that in the link. Go check out some of their poems. And that's what the German tradition was doing with Hegel and Schelling, natural philosophy, however you say it, natural philosophie, or however you say it in German. That whole movement. And then it moved, of course, it moved into Freud. Freud was a German or like Austrian, but like he was reading the Germans and Schopenhauer and Nietzsche and that whole lineage. And it's pretty cool because another place you can find dragon smoke is within your dreams, like the dreams at night, because dream interpretation has a lot of pre-Christian symbolism in it. Have you ever noticed that? There's a lot of like occult and tribal and other symbolism in your dreams, and maybe you've never seen it before. That's because these things are within us. We have been coded in a certain way of nature. We grew with nature. We grew out of nature. It is within us, and we can tap back into this and into that, and then share that with other people, and they will resonate with that. So let's talk a couple things that limit this. American fundamentalism. The religious people in America, they hate dark places, man. Have you ever known someone religious? They don't want to go there. That's Valium, Oxycontin, whatever. I don't even know what people take. Adderall. I don't even know whatever antidepressant SSRI they're shoving down their throats now. That's Christian culture. They are avoiding that stuff like the fucking plague. I've known too many people who are Christian and just loaded on antidepressants. And some people need to be on antidepressants. Honestly, some people need to be. But like, I really like to see people on antidepressants as, you know, a friend who have confronted those dark places, who have confronted the shadow and gone into the side of light, and they're having problems. Maybe it's biological or something's, you know, PTSD or something. I like to see that. But like people who've never confronted the shadow and they're masking that with drugs, that does not go good. So like if you're in that situation right now, you can still do it. It's just going to be harder. If you're on antidepressants right now, like I'm not saying get off because that could be maybe detrimental, but I am saying really you're going to have to put 2, 3, 4, 5 times the effort in confronting your shadow. But you can do it through yoga and meditation and Jungian active imagination work. All that is possible. So realism is against the leap of the spirit. So let's come up a little bit. So this right here, everybody, is unity consciousness, escaping out of nude and sleep, what we can come together and do. Now we got pre-Christian symbolism. Look at this. Look at that symbolism. It's pretty freaking bizarre. Even within Christian symbolism, there's like a lot of occult stuff. American fundamentalists. Let's blow this up, everybody. I just want everybody to see these wackos. There they are, everybody. And now let's talk about realism. Oh, wrong way. Excuse me. Realism and capitalism. Excuse me. Capitalism is against the descent to the soul. Honestly, because you can't go into the soul if you're so worried about money. You can't descend if you are worried about that job because you don't have time for that job. To descend into the soul, to be able to do shadow work requires the time and the effort and the space and the leisure and the support from family and friends to move into that. And money has nothing to do with that. It's better done without money, without stress, without screens, without the internet, without the phone, without texting, without your nagging friends or family. It's best done without all that. So realism is the descent is against the leap to spirit, because things become so real that you can't descend into spirit, or you can't ascend or descend into spirit. You can't leap there because you are stuck in this framework. If you're too stuck in objectivity, you can't make that leap. Populism and social thought are against the solitary wildness. And I actually don't have a video or a photo for this, but the populism we saw with Donald Trump is against the solitary wildness because it's group mentality. You guys see how everybody reacts to Joe Biden and Donald Trump. It's insane how everybody is reacting to it. And the allegiances and the obedience that they have to that. If you can't have that solitary wildness, if you have that solitary wildness is being able to spend months in nature and be alone and not have to be involved in all this. Like at times you need, like Robert Bly in the Vietnam War, at times you have to be political. Then at other times you have to pull back completely. Don't live in the middle zone, everybody. Come out, do your thing, and then be done with it. Don't be a martyr. Careerism in poetry is against. Careerism in poetry doesn't allow enough time for descent. And all the MFAs, 2-3 year programs, that is not enough time for the descent. And with all the student teaching and assignments and graduate work and literature classes, that doesn't give them enough time. And if you're just so focused on a career and getting a book published before 30, you're not going to have that time to descend. The reluctance of American poets to translate makes them ignorant. To translate Li Po, we don't understand what's happening outside of us. We don't understand the Spanish surrealists or the realists or the Spanish symbolists or the Chinese wilderness poets. And the best way to understand those people is to translate. Even if you don't know the language, just getting dictionaries and figuring it out and asking people who do. And translating poems can really teach you the core and the different sounds in the poetry. You have to compare the modern work. So one of the main things you need that about this essay is that don't judge your work on who's writing now, because guess what? If I compare myself to nature writers right now, like especially like ones that aren't like spiritual ecology writers who focus on that completely, but people who dabble in it, I'm hot shit. I can beat all of them and beat like that's competitive talk, excuse me. But like I am at a different level of quality, and you probably are too. But if I compare myself to Rilke or Li Po or Robinson Jeffers, I would look like a fool. I'd look like a high schooler compared to them. And that's what you need to get at, everybody. You have to compare yourself to the poets of old, not the poets of new, and then suddenly you'll become the best poet in the world. That's how you do it, everybody. What's getting published now isn't the best. The best have come because they didn't have fucking laptops. They didn't have all these distractions. There's a couple people now, but there's such a high amount of good poets back then because there was no TV, there was no acting, there was no social media. There were people out there who were going ham at poetry, who put 50,000 hours in by the time they croaked, 100,000 hours in by the time they fucking croaked. Because if you put 6 hours in a day for 50 years, you'll be at 100,000 hours of writing poetry. Imagine that. And a lot of people did that. They started when they were 20 and they went till they were 70. Dude, that's so much time. I can't imagine that many poets are doing that right now. So let's do another poem by Tu Fu. At the end of a mountain gorge, I hear dark monkeys wail. In native lands, a white goose flies over. Where are my sisters? Where are my brothers? Where are my sisters? Where are my brothers? Dude, that is so deep, man. Do you see that leap in native? So at the end of the mountain gorge, boom, we have a setup. We have objectivity. I hear dark monkeys wail. That is in the emotion. We just descended. We just leapt into the emotions. That could have been anything. At the end of the mountain gorge, I see a butterfly. No, we are hearing dark monkey's wail. But now we're pulled back out. In native land, a white goose flies over. Where are my sisters? Where are my brothers? That is so internal. Those last two lines by Tu Fu, that is so internal. And Lorca says, the poet Lorca, very often intellect is poetry's enemy because it is too much given to imitation, because it lifts the poet to a throne of sharp edges and makes him oblivious to the fact that he may be suddenly devoured by ants, or a great arsenic lobster may fall on his head. And I agree. I think there's a time and a place for imitation, especially if you're getting going, but I would say maybe 10 to 25% of the time you should be imitating if you're writing. And at the start, maybe there's a little bit more room if you're trying to really get in the flow. But once you understand and you know what you're writing and you've imitated a lot, you just need to be let loose and you need to make those leaps. You need to do those things. If you are a poet, which you are, if you're still listening to this, if you've made it 31 freaking minutes, you have to leap, you have to play, and you can't be scared of what you're going to do on the page. So, quote one more time, and we're going to end it with this. Help us seek the duende. And the duende is In Search of the Duende by Lorca. The duende is that dragon smoke, that leap, that spirit. And to help us seek the duende, there are neither maps nor discipline. All one knows is that it burns the blood like powdered glass, that it exhausts, that rejects all the sweet geometry one has learned, that it breaks with all styles, that dresses the delicate boy of Rimbaud in an acrobatic green suit, or that it puts the eye of a dead fish on Count Latremont in the early morning boulevard. Like, yeah, could you think of Rimbaud, I think I'm saying that right. The great travel poet, the leaping poet, who started so young in a fucking green acrobat suit. That's funny, man. That's elite, man. You have to have these metaphors. That's the number one key to good poetry, according to Robert Bly and myself, is metaphor. And that starts with leaping. And leaping is done in sobriety, everybody. I hate to break it to all my marijuana folks out there. You can make leaps in marijuana land, and they're pretty good. But the best leaps happen in sobriety, not on coffee and not on weed. So, everybody, this is the first video in a huge series on Robert Bly. It might come out to 100 plus hours. It will. I mean, I'm guessing that it's going to come out to 100 plus hours. So be sure to check that out on thelitunderground.com. Leave a comment, subscribe, say what's up. Check out the next video in the series. Peace.